Welcome to Disciples Ignited YouTube channel, where we focus on Jesus, advance his kingdom, and prepare his disciples. Hi, my name is David Fleming, and I want to invite you to join with me in these short videos. They're going to be less than 5 minutes long, but I want to share with you a few thoughts from God's Word that I know are going to be helpful to you as you grow in Jesus, as you grow in being a disciple of the Lord. Now, before we get into our study today, let me encourage you to look at my newly released book on Amazon on discipleship. It's titled Spirit-Filled Discipleship, How God Calls Christ-Like Disciples. You know, I really wrote it just for y'all who are growing as disciples. So look it up on Amazon. I'm sure that you'll be glad that you did. Now, let's get started on our study on the life and ministry of David. Today we're going to be looking at a very interesting aspect of David's growing up. David, who was an excellent worker. I mean, from the time that he was very young, as a boy, he was working for his dad in the family business as a shepherd. But we find that David was often ignored and unappreciated by others. As we just said, for many years, David had worked for his dad as a shepherd, but we've already studied how his dad often ignored him, and he was certainly disdained or looked down upon by his brothers. In fact, when Prophet Samuel was sent by the Lord to anoint the next king of Israel, they didn't even think about inviting David to the festivities. So we see some dysfunction in that family. But after David for many years had been a shepherd for his dad, he was still just a young teenager. We find that the Lord exalted David and he became a personal musician to King Saul. 1 Samuel 16, verses 17 and 18 tells us, So Saul said to his attendants, Find someone who plays well and bring him to me. One of the servants answered, I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. Now see, at this time, King Saul was being tormented by an evil spirit, and they felt that if he could just get a musician to play for him, maybe that would soothe him down a bit. And so they brought in David, who was an excellent musician. And so David has this personal contact with the king, but we found out later that the king didn't even know David's name. Well, after that, not only was David a personal musician for King Saul, but he became an armor bearer for King Saul. Now, an armor bearer back in those days was a young man who would carry the armor for the king. Now, this was interesting because that would have put David in even closer contact with the king. In 1 Samuel 16:21, we read, David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Now, this is interesting because it says Saul liked him very much. And so that really makes it sound like David had some personal relationship with the king. But if you'll keep on reading and follow with me, you'll find that that is not the case at all. King Saul didn't know who David was, not even a bit. So what does it mean that King Saul liked him very much? It means that King Saul liked what David did for him. See, King Saul didn't care about other people. He was a tormented man. He only cared about what people did for him. And that's how David, I'm sure, must have felt. But how did he deal with these emotions of being taken for granted, being maybe even being ignored? Maybe you have those feelings. Let me tell you, as a disciple of Jesus, you're called to be a worker, and an excellent worker at that. But maybe you feel like your work and your ministry is ignored. Maybe you feel like you're unappreciated. But let me encourage you, you're not serving others. Not really. You're serving the one who has called you as his disciple. His name is Jesus. So you keep that in your heart. You keep that before your mindset, that you're serving Jesus. You're his disciple, and do your best. Follow with me as we continue on this subject in the next video.